Okay, so we're going to do transformations of square root and cube root functions. So we're going to do the transformations of square and cube root functions, and we're going to talk about what our H, K, and A are. So I'm going to write these in color to match. So I want to know what H represents in my equation over here. So what does H do? Well, H is my horizontal shift, and so I'm going to write in here that this is horizontal shift. And another way that they say shift, they can also say translation. So a horizontal translation. And if H is positive, so here where H is positive, this means that it's moving left. So I'm going to say this is going to be left. And when H is negative right here, when H is negative, we're going to say that this moves right. Okay, so this is for my H. So I'm going to go, this is my H right here. Okay, K, so for my K, I'm going to do this in purple. My K is right here in my equation. My K is my vertical shift, so I'm going to say this is vertical. And the way that we can also say shift is translation. And when K is positive, it moves up. And when K is negative, it moves down. So these are my Ks. Okay. When I'm looking for either that middle of my cubic function or the endpoint on my square root function, you can kind of think of it as the vertex, and it's the same as my HK, so I'm going to change the color of this to black and say this is going to be my H and my K, so we'll make that purple, my HK in my equation. For A, my A is going to be green here. If my A is negative, so this part, if it's negative, then that means it's reflected across the x-axis, which means that it's going to be upside down. So when A is negative, it's reflected across the x-axis, which means that it flips upside down. And actually, we're going to do the square root. So if it's normally this way, it would flip upside down and be like that, right? So it would flip upside down. So I'm going to erase this guy, and it's going to look like this guy. It's a square root. Okay. If I want to know if it shrinks or if it stretches, for all my A's that are bigger than 1, then my graph is going to stretch. And for all my A's that are between 0 and 1, it's going to shrink. And it's important that we use the word vertical because there is a horizontal thing, and we're not talking about that right now, but when you're doing things in your online homework, they'll specifically ask for it to be vertical or horizontal, and A represents your vertical stretch and shrink. Okay, so what I want to do now is use these rules in these example problems, and when I look at them, I can say that this guy right here, well, this is my H, and this guy right here, well, this is my K. So I can say that this is going to move, right? It's going to translate, so it's going to be transhorizontal translation, right 7, and then a vertical translation up 2. Okay. When I'm looking at number 2, I've got an A. Well, that's going to be, I should have done this in purple here. That should have been purple. My A is 4, and my K is -1. And I can talk about it being a vertical stretch of 4, and it translates vertically down 1. Okay. Number 3, I have my A being this negative out here, which really means it's a -1, and I have my H being a +3 in here, and that tells me that I have it reflected across the x-axis. That's my negative out front, and then I have it moving left 3. And the last one here, I have this 1/2 out front. I've got an H of -2, and I've got a K of -6. So that's going to tell me that I am shrinking. So I'm going to have a vertical shrink of 1/2. And I'm going to shift 2 right, and then I'm going to shift 6 down. Okay. And then my last part right here, I want to be able to talk about what my function would look like if they gave me this description. So I'm going to go through this a little bit at a time and say, well, if I have a square root parent function, that tells me that I have this square root guy. And if it tells me it reflects across the x-axis, I know that it's negative out front. And if it's shifted 7 units left, well, that's going to be underneath this radical part, and that's going to give me a +7. And if it tells me it's moving 1 unit down, well, that's going to be outside of the radical, and that's going to be -1. And then I'm just going to put my little handy dandy y equals in front of it so that I have my entire equation. On the next one, it's telling me that I have a cube root function, so I'm going to start with a cube root function, and the turning point, or I'm going to say my vertex, is located here, which gives me my h and my k. So that's going to tell me that I have a -2 underneath my radical. I kind of made that a little big, so I have a -2 and then a +3, so that gives me that part. And when I deal with this negative right here, I can rewrite that and say that's really going to be a plus sign. And I'm going to put my y equals out front so that I have an equation.